Hi there, I'm Connie Wilder. This is Sue Rickles, my colleague. Thank you for joining us today. Today's topic is supporting other women. How do we support other women? How do we do it well? How do we become that agent that can give and receive? That ability to give and receive is wildly important in this. Sue, my question for you is to start us off is how do you support other women?
Well, it is an honor to be here with you, Connie, as a very supportive individual, and I have been honored to be the recipient of her support and care. And I would say, I want to go back to another example in my life that I try to emulate, and that is a boss of mine previously. I was very young. She was so encouraging through mess ups, through hard times. There was always this positive approach. It was always solution focused. She lifted us up more than herself sometimes, which wasn't, maybe that was her own work that she needed, was to receive as well. And I think the piece for her is she listened so well and met us where we were at. So her employees, every one of us, that was what she really tried to do. And as a female herself in the corporate environment, she could recognize areas in which we might struggle or have hurdles, and she met us there. And I think that's the piece that I am trying to pass on now that I'm maybe even older than she was at that point, is modeling and coming alongside others, listening well, not that I have the answer, but supporting them in their journey, lifting them up. And so I'm going to ask the same in return, Connie. Over your years of experience, what stands out in ways you have shown up, but also ways you have received?
Hmm. So one example where I clearly received this and I received it so well was when my kids were about 4 years old and I was at a retreat in Las Vegas and it was a women's retreat. There may have been one male there. There may have been one male there. And so anyways, the woman on the stage was talking to another woman on the stage and she said, I will hold space for you. And I
Mm.
thought to myself, that's all I need is someone to hold space for me because I didn't even want the help. At the time, I didn't want the help, although I sure could have used it. And I think that the receiving is another area where I have enormous room to grow. I'm such a giver. I'm a giver, giver, giver. And I think that the self care is a couple of my phrases for the year, actually, for 2025 is around self care. That's a separate topic. And so back to that story of the woman on the stage, she was talking to someone else and she said, I will hold space for you. And I remember sitting in that audience thinking, wow, I feel like she is talking to me. And that was several years ago. I mean, more than about 5 or 6 years ago. And so that is one example of somebody like saying something and I took it to mean like support for myself and it I just needed to know that somebody was holding space for me. And so that's one area, one example, if you will. So what else do you want people to walk away from today's session with? What do you want them to take with them?
The key piece is that we're stronger together. When you do better, I do better. When I do better, you do better. There is no one else like you. There is no one else like me. And I think if we can hold that we bring this beauty and richness to everything we do, every job we take, every friendship, every relationship, that is unique to us. There's no competition then. It's like you go knock it out of the park because you bring this, this, and this, and I'm so excited for you. And in turn, it opens up the space for them to say the same thing in return. You bring this and this and this to the table. We're never in competition then, knowing we say it differently, we approach it differently, even if it's the same topic. Look at these podcasts. You and I might see things differently, and together it's rich. Would it be okay individually? Yeah. But together there's this richness that both of our strengths bring. And I think that's the piece where jealousy has no space, competition has no space. In fact, that holds us back as a group, not just individually, but as a group. And so that's my key thing that I would hope every woman takes away from today and that I continue to work on. How about yourself, Connie? What would you hope the women that are listening today, and maybe some men as well, are going to take away from our conversation today?
Well, thank you for that, Sue. And that we are stronger together is such an important element. That is super, super strong. The other thing I hope that people take with them is that asking someone, how may I best support you? And the person may not even know. I mean, the people in the LA fires, the fires have just happened. They don't even know what they need yet. At least some of them don't. And so, yet asking people rather than making that assumption can get clarity for the person asking quickly. And I think that's an element that I hope people take as well with them today, that the importance of asking someone, how may I best support you? And yet I say that with a little bit of the knowledge of the fact that that woman said that on the stage for me, and I never would have known that that's what I needed. I wouldn't have known. And so ask them and give yourself space to be surprised.
Right. On that same note, I was once told when we give, you have such a great feeling on the inside. I think we love to help others. And when we don't ask and receive, we actually rob the other person from doing that for us. And that, I think, shifts that mindset into it's okay to receive and how to receive well and not be uncomfortable with receiving, but be gracious and enjoy it just like others have enjoyed your giving. And Connie, you model this regularly of asking, or I mean, giving, and I receive. Not always well. Like that's something I know I'm working on. And your generosity goes before you. And I just want to say thank you personally and to all the other women that have also done that for me and with me. And I think it's so powerful when we leave that mark. I liken it to this ripple effect that goes out that gives us that momentum to continue that forward, like that pay it forward kind of concept. Um, Connie, from your perspective, what are your thoughts on receiving well?
Mm, my thoughts on receiving well. Oh my gosh. Well, I mentioned that I feel like I have a lot to learn on this piece, that I can give, 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 but the whole concept of receiving it well. I want to tell you that I was just in Trader Joe's last week and I mentioned to someone how I'm working on self care. I'd met earlier in the day with a personal trainer and I was figuring out some of that stuff, some of my goals for 2025. And the concept of self care really struck this woman. And this is a woman that I've known since my kids were little, about, oh gosh, a good 16 years I've known her. And not, do I know her well? I know a lot about her. I know my own judgment of her as well. And yet she is someone I totally respect, even though I know we see things differently. Also, we see some things differently. And so I told her the concept of self care and how that was an area of focus for me. And she really took that like, wow, self-care, like, wow. And so I think this is more about giving than receiving, yet it's been a flag for me, that whole self-care concept. And how do I put my energy into self-care this year immediately? And yeah, so I don't know, how about you, Sue? How do you reflect on self-care, or how do you reflect on this concept of receiving as it relates to supporting other women?
And I want to pause and say, how can I support you in reaching your self care goals for this year? No answer needed right now, but I want to extend that. And you're right, self care is one that tends to go out the window and we don't talk enough about. And as women to women, how can we support each other and bring that conversation up regularly? Because I don't know that most of us do it well. The first thing that goes out the window if our kids are sick is probably our workout routine, our diet, whatever it is, because we're caregivers. And how can we shift that mindset to still take 30 minutes for ourselves to care here, because if this isn't okay, the rest of this isn't going to go okay. And I'm working on similarly continuing to. I started mine last year of really pausing and doing more of a mindful self care. And while I had the physical going, I really needed to slow down and be in nature more and take care of this organ up here and being really intentional and mindful with my practices of how I show up and how I want to be each and every day. And so I think it's this ongoing process, is how I'm seeing it, almost like this string that attaches and it goes out to each of us and still connects.
It comes back to that we're stronger together for sure.
It does. And I
Absolutely.
think you and I are both being vulnerable right now. And I want to acknowledge this is another piece where maybe it's training. And I want to talk about, like, societally, some walls. We have to be strong. We're professional women. Like, don't talk about self care, because that, whatever the messages we might have received of what women must be like or need to be like. And I want to stand up to that and say, we get to define that together. And how can we invite these conversations? How can we support each other in these conversations? Because we only have one body and we only have one us. And how do we bring that best version forward for lots and lots of years? What are your thoughts, Connie? I want to bounce back to you for this longevity kind of mindset and support.
Well, I love it. I love all of what you're saying, Sue. And I think we are being vulnerable. And I think that concept of putting on our own oxygen mask, those planes on the airplane, they tell us that because otherwise we can be of zero help to anybody else unless we put that oxygen mask on first. So that comes to mind. And another piece that comes to mind is around the training. We haven't been trained to, it comes back to those neurons that fire together, wire together. And my neurons have never had this kind of conversation, if you will. And so, and maybe never is or is not the proper word. I don't know. And so, what I want to say though is that those neurons that wire together or fire together, wire together. And I want longevity into my 90s. I do, I do, I do. And so, yes. And so how do we wire together new neurons? And that's what I think this conversation is about ultimately.
I couldn't agree more, Connie. And you know what came up as you were just saying that is, when I was younger, smoking was totally okay. We didn't talk about the deadly aspects of it because we didn't know. And we are learning new things that we weren't aware of when you and I were young girls, but
Mhm.
we are aware of now. And so collaboratively as women, coming together and embracing what we do know now to benefit us so that we can thrive into our 90s, or I hope to make it 3 digits and beyond, and thrive, not just survive, thrive. And there are ways that we can do that together in building each other up and building this internal strength, but also the physical strength. I know you and I have had just a conversation about weightlifting and the benefits of that, about hormones and the changes our bodies go through. And if we're not talking to other women about that, we might miss out on information or knowledge. And I always, when I have a conversation, I learn from you. I learn from those that I talk to. I don't have all the answers, and I get more information. We're still learning so much.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And I hope we are doing this podcast well for another 20 years for sure. And what does that mean, Sue? I mean, you and I are both vulnerable, and yet how do we support each other throughout this? And we have had our own journeys unique to each of us, and yet we've had this journey together as well. And I love, love, love being on this journey with you. And I hope that we are well into our 80s when we are still supporting each other as friends.
And you
And
know what, Connie? You just said the key. We're friends, and never once have we been trying to compete with each other.
mhm.
Because I know what you bring, you know what I bring, and together this works. Yes, we have different things going outside of this, and together there's this piece. doesn't mean we also don't encourage each other in these other things that we're doing. And that's the beautiful piece, is there's not competition, but there is this excitement for your next adventure, your next thing that you're looking forward to. And building that trust and the rapport together, I think is just phenomenal. And I also am thrilled to be on this journey with you. In closing, is there anything you want to leave our listeners with?
Just that we can hold more than one thought. And so that asking somebody, how may I best support you, can be extremely valuable, and the person may not know. So give yourself that space for grace, and then also know that we are stronger together.
Beautiful. And so with that, we leave you building, reaching out, supporting, knowing we are stronger together, and sending those ripples out into the world.